Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for December 5th, 2016. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. Fritzen.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz is not here. Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Gaines is not here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've had a request to address the council tonight, and we will do that before going into business. And Mr. Doug Fansler has asked to speak to council, so please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Doug Fansler. I live at 307 Carriage Hills Road. First of all, I'd like to address the 45-day wait period that is a part of the public speaking. I just wondered if anybody really knew how that delays people or not, keeps people from speaking. For every 45 days in 2017, if I were to start on the first day that you guys meet, I would only be able to speak in 7 of the 24 meetings, which is 29%. If it's 30 days, it's only 10 of 24, so about 41% of the days of the meetings that you had. If it's 15 days, I'd only be able to speak at 12 of the 24, so 50%. I don't think that that's very good from a perspective that you already limit speech to 2 minutes and you limit it to a total of, I think it's 15, whatever the total limit is. On any given night. I would like for you to consider removing that limit. I don't think that it serves the public well as far as being able to come in here and address you. Second, I hope that I had hoped that the press would be able to have answered, at least ask, and tried to get answers to these questions, but I haven't seen that so far. I hope that you will be able to provide them, or the press will be able to ask and or provide them soon. Why were you so late in letting the public know about the $1.8 million incentive? Hiding the location of the restaurant makes perfect sense. The incentive, no. Did you know about the incentive before you spent over $600,000 on the Route 66 museum? Did you know about it before you spent approximately $300,000 to $400,000 for the houses that were bought and sold at a loss? Did you know about it before the recent vote to allow you to raise our real estate taxes? Think of at any point in time when you knew that fact of the incentive was going to be offered or had been asked. I think that would have been important to have weighed into those decisions. I would like to know, too, was it Portillo's that asked for it, or was it the town of Normal that offered it? Why is the transfer of motor fuels tax on the omnibus bill tonight? It doesn't seem like an appropriate place for that spending. One thing that I thought was odd, it doesn't mention any amount that's being considered to be on the omnibus or for this transfer. I would have a question. I wonder if it's in approximately $1.8 million. Thank you.
We move on to the omnibus vote agenda. These are items considered routine in nature and will be handled with a single vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I'd like to be excused from voting on any bills I may have incurred in my duties as mayor.
Move approval. Second.
Ask to be excused from voting on Bloomington offset bill, please.
Thank you. Items on the omnibus to be considered tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 21st, 2016, and approval of town of Normal expenditures for payment as of November 30th, 2016. A motion to approve the year 2017 meeting calendar and a resolution of intent for the use of motor fuel tax funds to finance refunded general obligation bonds. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Gaines.
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved. We have one item of general orders, and that's the resolution authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the town of Normal and Bloomington Landmark Development Incorporated pertaining to the construction of Portillo's Restaurant on North Veterans Parkway.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Ms. Lorenz?
I'll kick it off. Appreciate the speaker's comments tonight. I have received some feedback. Personally, I mean, I think it'll be good for us to have some dialogue here at the meeting tonight among ourselves, and for the purpose of certainly making sure we vet all of the details on this. You know, I think what I want to say is that a statement and then a question, and that you know, this is an economic development. This is a redevelopment of an area along Veterans Parkway. This is an opportunity for us to replace some businesses who have sought to relocate, maybe for a larger footprint of a store, to Bloomington, for example. I think it's certainly a good project for us to seriously consider and approve. I've had the good fortune of visiting several Portillo restaurants in the Chicagoland area. Haven't found one empty yet. You know, in fact, they seem to be busting at the seams, and I'm amazed at how quickly they move people. So it is a bit of a very almost perhaps iconic restaurant, and I feel we should be proud as residents that they've chosen our community. They must see something. I guess they know that we like to eat out a lot, but I think there's more to it than that. Having said that, here's to my questions. You know, let's talk a little bit, and maybe that's staff, or maybe that's my colleagues here at the council. Let's talk a little bit about the who. You know, who is the developer? And you know, it's stated as I think Landmark Development Company. You know, so let's get out there. What, you know, who is it? And to maybe some of the questions that were raised here. You know, how did this come together? Maybe a little bit of background, not to rehash a lot of details, but just a little bit of background on that. And then secondly would be a little bit about the terms, in terms of, you know, why the 1.8? How did we get to that? Obviously, it sounds like, you know, an answer to that question is, well, to make the deal viable. Okay, well, what was viable for the developer? You know, a little bit of details around that. And then, of course, I'm a little concerned about the 8% too. So if we could have a little discussion around that, and I don't know whether that's you, Mr. Peterson, or other members of the staff, or if other members of the council want to chime in and maybe have a better understanding than I do. I'd like to kick around those thoughts.
Well, let me try to take those questions in order.
Okay.
If I can remember them. You ask, who is Bloomington Landmark Development, Inc.? This is an LLC that's been established for this project. I can tell you that the town communicated primarily with Tartan Realty, Doug Reichel, who is a very successful development. Tartan has a relationship with Portillo's, as they do a number of other retail restaurant brands. And probably every bit of 6 months ago, maybe longer than that, began to have some dialogue with staff about the fact that Portillo's had interest in the community, and they looked at a number of potential sites, all of them on Veterans Parkway or near Veterans Parkway. Portillo's had indicated that was where they wanted to be. And they had other, certainly, criteria. Site size was an important one because this is, I think, a 2.5 acre site. They needed a large site to accommodate a relatively significant footprint. 9,000 to 10,000 square feet is their typical footprint. They want dual drive-up lanes and lots of off-street parking, and that's a requirement of Portillo's to accommodate the level of business they plan to do at this restaurant. So that limited the number of sites that were available. Certainly along Veterans Parkway, just about every site is already developed. There are very few greenfield sites, in fact, none in the area they wanted to locate. They were really interested in being as close to the College Avenue Veterans intersection as possible. and they looked at some sites in that area, and either those sites could not be purchased or they were simply the purchase price was unreasonable. They eventually, the proposed site, which is at 202 Landmark Drive, was a site that they looked at, they settled upon. The developer, they pitched that site to Portillo's, and Portillo's said that met their conditions. That was a site that was not for sale, wasn't listed for sale, but they did find that the owner was willing to sell. And so they were able to negotiate a purchase price for the property. Again, it's a income-producing property that the current owner purchased the hotel a few years ago and put a substantial amount of money in the property. There was quite a bit of work done to the hotel at that time, and so had a significant investment. So they did successfully negotiate a purchase contract and then estimated site development costs. The relationship between the developer and Portillo's, the developer will essentially create a buildable site, and they will do a ground lease, enter into a ground lease with Portillo's. Portillo's will build the building, and they will own the building, and there will simply be a long-term ground lease with the developer. And that's often how these projects work, not always. Sometimes we'll work directly with the restaurant or the retailer. Oftentimes we'll work through a developer. They're different situations for different circumstances. In this particular instance, nearly all of our communication has been with the developer, not necessarily with Portillo's.
Remind you?
Where are we going?
Well, now kind of move into a little bit of the dollars and cents piece.
Yeah.
And, how did we arrive at the 1.8?
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about that.
The developer approached the town and indicated that given the considerable site development costs, the acquisition of property, that it would be necessary to find other sources of funding in order to make the project viable. There is, working with client Portillo's, there's a certain amount that they are willing to pay for a ground lease, and they certainly, given the type of company they are, they're able to dictate those terms. So they knew they had a ceiling on the ground lease, and given the nearly $4.3 million that they were going to have to invest in the site, and that's before any construction is started, and given the anticipated ground lease amount of $220,000, that would have rendered a return on investment to the developer of roughly 4.6%. That's a very, very low return rate on a real estate transaction of this nature. I mean, for an investor to get that kind of return, they'd probably be better off in finding a very safe mutual fund or something of that nature. Their target return, their minimum target return was 8%, which is certainly a reasonable return on a real estate investment. There was a time in the recent past where these types of real estate transactions, developers were looking for a 12+% return. That was more typical, even in some cases 20%. But clearly times have changed, and real estate developers are willing to accept, in fact have to accept, a lower rate of return, even on a significant project like this where there is an element of risk. They presented to the town. We required that they provide all the financial details associated with the transaction, which we vetted, as we typically do, because it is not our practice to offer any public assistance if it cannot be justified. Meaning, if the project is viable without public incentives, then we would not offer public incentives. In this particular case, we did vet the numbers, and we found the estimates to be reasonable in terms of the site development cost. And in order for the developer to achieve an 8% target rate of return, that left a gap of $1,825,000. That's where that number comes from.
Okay.
And this is common. This is typically the process that we've used in other projects where public incentives have been offered. And if you go up and down Veterans Parkway, on Bloomington's side or Normal's side, most of the development that's occurred in the past 15 to 20 years have had some public benefit in terms of some form of tax incentive. And that's because land costs are extraordinarily high along Veterans Parkway. I think we all accept that. And that most of the sites that have been developed in recent years are redevelopment sites. Not a lot of greenfield sites, even though we've had greenfield sites that have benefited from sales tax rebates, particularly like Menards and Sam's Club and some of those, Home Depot and the like. But it is typically very difficult to undertake a redevelopment of a site. That's where you're buying an income-producing asset and tearing it down and having to absorb that cost and then put in some new enterprise and that project makes it difficult for it to yield an acceptable rate of return without some level of public assistance. So that's sort of where the numbers came from. Typically, when the town enters into these types of agreements, we typically try to share new revenue that's created by the business enterprise as opposed to writing a check up front. Mm-hmm. In this case, the developer was agreeable to sharing in the revenue that the new enterprise would create. That limited the risk of the town, means if the revenue doesn't materialize, we don't have to share it. And that's typically what the council has liked to do as opposed to giving straight-up grants, but we have done that also given circumstances on some occasions. So the $1.825 million is designed to close a gap to make the project viable. Without closing that gap, the project at this location would not be a viable project. It would not make sense for the developer to make that investment for a yield as low as 4.6%. It just the minimal yield would not justify the risk involved. And so our goal was to close the gap to make sure the project is viable. It's up to you to determine, is this a project that's desirable? If it's not a desirable project, then it doesn't make any sense to incent it. Mm-hmm. But I think from the staff's perspective, we believe this is a desirable project. I've been here for almost 30 years, and I can tell you throughout my career with the town, this is the most often requested restaurant that we have received from the community. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, when are we going to get a Portillo's? And I'm excited and gratified that we're almost there. And I think you're right. We should feel a bit honored that they chose to place their first downstate restaurant right here in our community. And I think it does speak well of our community and how much and how they believe that the community will support this restaurant. What did I
The
miss?
only other question might be, and maybe you've addressed it, but the 8% interest
Okay.
here.
Yeah. Well, again, an 8% return is what they've so there's obviously the gap, the $1.8 million gap will not be filled day one. It will take a period of years to satisfy that gap. And that's what drives the 8%. It's an 8%, which is a large interest rate, but that's the return that they need in order to justify the project. So that's where the 8% comes from. Okay. So the sooner we pay off the obligation, and that's one of the reasons why we're recommending that we provide 100% of the sales tax and food and beverage tax as part of the rebate because we want to get it paid off as soon as possible. There have been other projects in the past where we've delayed that. We've maybe given a portion of the sales tax, and it's taken a lot longer. Given the 8% carrying charge, it makes sense to get the obligation paid off as quickly as possible.
And there is a prepay clause.
There is that option if the council would at some point want to exercise that, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Gaines?
Well, I think there's been some question about why, what's so good about replacing one income-producing thing for another. And I'm guessing, from what I'm understanding, from what I've read, and and I understand from all of this, is that the amount of business that will go through there, they suggest will be over $8 million a year. And when, tell me if I've got my math wrong, I don't know that, and with that, then with the sales tax, once that $1.8 million is going to be paid, that's going to be a lot of tax, sales tax and food and beverage taxes coming into the community. And I suspect it far outweighs what the motel has been bringing in.
Correct. The current hotel generates about $35,000 a year in hotel motel taxes. The Portillo's, if using the sales projections that they provided, which are not unrealistic and are we've vetted, and those are the $8 million is not unusual for Portillo's. It would be generating about $450,000 a year. We happen to use, for our purposes of analysis, a lower sales number. We use $6 million just to be conservative, and we feel very comfortable with that. At $6 million, it would generate about $330,000 a year, and then there would be some annual growth in that. So no question, this is a significant generator of taxes, sales taxes and food and beverage taxes.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple of thoughts that I wouldn't be surprised if some of my colleagues up here around the table have heard recently since this deal was announced. I want to kind of take a stab at right now. The first of which I'm glad that Ms. Gaines and Mr. Peterson kind of clarified. So the $35,000 in hotel motel tax that the town is currently getting for that piece of land, the property that's sitting on that, and then if I'm not mistaken, our share of the property taxes for the current Motel 6 is also $4,000-ish a year. Is that right?
Yeah, in that range.
So
correct.
Roughly, the hotel, or the Motel 6, excuse me, that is on that site is producing about $40,000 a year, give or take, of income to the town. And on the flip side of that, being able to look just at once this 1.8 is satisfied, looking at $450,000, $500,000 projections of tax revenue coming in from the Portillo's. When you look at it that way, it's a pretty easy comparison to make. I would think that giving up $40,000 to make $500,000 in a lot of cases makes some sense, and it's a great deal for the taxpayers. On the flip side, I also have heard some of the concern about the property acquisition cost. The Motel 6 that is being acquired for this was bought in 2011 for about half of what the purchase price is now, and that is before you even clear the site and then start building new, just for the land. And while that's something that has to be balanced, at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers, for me at least, overall, and as somebody who works in real estate as well, this is it's a good deal. It's a good deal for the taxpayers. It's something that in the long run will bring in revenue to the town of Normal from people outside of this community. I don't think there's any doubt, especially being the first, that we will have a regional appeal with that Portillo's, people coming in off 55 or 39. And it's because of that, I've gone back and forth on a lot of the specifics of this. To me, at the end of the day, it's become a no-brainer.
I would point out, Mr. Preston, and it probably wasn't common knowledge to the council, but the reason that the price is so much higher now is upon buying that property, which was not in good shape. The current owner invested a significant amount of money in retrofitting and remodeling the property. So it would naturally raise the price of it.
Sure, but at the end of the day, it's still, just land. Whether it's updated or not, it'll be torn down.
Right.
Mr. McBride.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are important to remember with this, and someone up here touched on it. The fact is that for most retail or restaurant developments, the land that is most desirable and therefore most expensive is located along Veterans Parkway. And we don't have that much land available there right now. So that's one of the reasons this all costs what it does. I think it's important to keep sight of that. Personally, I have gone back and forth too quite a bit. $1.825 million is a lot for a restaurant, for any restaurant. There's really not much debating that fact. I do think it's probably more important to keep in mind that as far as an actual budgetary impact annually, while the $1.825 million is the total amount over time, the actual annual impact is going to be in the 330 to 370 range. So that's what we're looking at as far as an annual expense. What this comes down to for me is, would this deal happen without the incentive? And the answer from everything I understand is probably no. And there are some other questions that need to be asked. Would it happen elsewhere if we don't do it? Maybe. Do we want it to happen here? Is it a good deal, as Mr. Preston said, for our community? Is this something that we want in our community? Is this something that makes our community better? And I would have to say yes to all of those. This is going to bring in a lot of new business. This is not just a matter of cannibalizing ourselves and taking business away from other restaurants. This is going to pull people in. This is going to be a destination. I don't think there's much question about that. I would advocate personally, just in the interest of saving a little bit of money, perhaps retiring this obligation sooner than 5 to 8 years, or at least have a real frank discussion about that. But otherwise, I'm in favor of this.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the questions from the speaker this evening on the project as well. As I'm guessing most of us have heard a fair amount of input, emails, questions from friends and town of Normal residents about this project. And I'm going to echo some of my counterparts' comments tonight a little bit. But I do want to kind of clear up some misconceptions I've heard through questions and contacts a little bit. I think, like I'm guessing most of my counterparts, $1.825 million is a lot of money, right? And why do we need to do that to bring a business to town? And I think, to echo Mr. McBride's comments, would it happen if it weren't for this money? Well, sure it would. It just wouldn't happen here. We're in a very, very competitive economic development landscape. It's competitive here in our community. Businesses moving from Normal to Bloomington. All of those businesses that are moving got incentives. They moved across our border and took money out of our budget. And it's not just happened here in the Twin Cities. It's happening all over central Illinois. Peoria is doing it. Everybody's doing it. That's unfortunate, maybe, but it would happen. Clearly, these guys, Portillo's Restaurants, are looking to expand downstate. They've made that no secret. And I think it is a good thing for our community. I think it is going to be a good economic driver. Clearly, it's interesting and relevant, and it seems to be a good risk. I can echo Ms. Loren's comments on a business-related trip to Wisconsin. On the way back, I was requested to pull over and stop and go 3 miles off the highway to the Portillo's. One person on the business trip was from St. Louis, one was from Minneapolis, and one was from Michigan. None of those folks are from Chicago, where we think of Portillo's being housed. All of those people were well aware of Portillo's and wanted me to drive 3 miles to get a hot dog, a Polish sausage, and an Italian beef. I think this is a relatively low risk with that kind of popularity, we hope. If this does pass, I will ask all of you to buy a Polish sausage, a hot dog, and Italian beef to make sure that this project is popular. Some of the questions I got, first, just I think we've done a good job, but I just want to highlight those comments. I think Mr. Peterson's explanation was really good, very thorough. But the $1.825 million is coming from the proceeds of this project. This project is paying for itself. Yes, there's a carrying cost because we're going to pay it over time, but the project itself is paying for itself. This proceeds, $1.825 million, is not coming from property tax. I got a couple of inquiries about that. Property tax is not involved in this deal whatsoever. And then lastly, the Veterans Parkway project. In a conversation earlier, Mr. Peterson, we chatted about the other locations and the insistence of the developer to be and Portillo's to be on Veterans Parkway. But I wanted to also highlight that some of the other areas that were brought up in some of the email questions that we got also have benefited from this same type of incentives. Constitution Place and North Normal got sales tax incentives to develop. So we're not just concentrating on one area for one particular development. That this has been pretty standard throughout our community to get these types of projects done. And I'm supportive of this because I do think that this is going to be an excellent revenue generator and a good quality of place amenity for our residents.
Thank you. Mr. Fritzen.
I agree with much of what my colleagues have said, and Mr. McCarthy touched on Constitution Place, which a very thoughtful email came from somebody who has an interest in that area. And I myself, even personally, when everybody was asking the question that we didn't have the answer to, where's Portillo's going to locate, that was a place my mind took me, was that North Main Street, because it had access from the interstate, easy access from the interstate, and was not too far from campus, which you figure that's going to be an obvious draw. So many students from Illinois State are from the Chicago area, and it's a place where you could capture visitors to the community who are leaving the community. A lot of big events. I have a long-term connection to the Illinois State football championships, the high school football championships, and people still, gnash their teeth over the fact that they left Normal, and there was an economic impact of having those here. But people traveling to those football games get there at game time and leave and head home right after the game because there's going to be a celebration or something. But a place like this will hold people like that in the community. So we don't have the football championships anymore, but we have other sporting events and things of that nature that I think having a restaurant of this nature will hold some of that traffic in the community. So we can't judge all those comings and goings, but I know that's one of the oft-repeated concerns was you're just going to displace business from other Bloomington Normal restaurants. It's not going to be new money. Sure, there will be a percentage of that, and especially the first 90 days or 120 days or whatever, which you won't find me at Portillo's for 3 to 4 months, but at least not normal. But so there will be a percentage of that, yes. But I think, and I've stated this before, to me, competition makes everybody better. If you're going to be in the game, you're going to work harder and work smarter and figure out a way to recapture lost business. But I think too that the destination aspect of it, Bloomington Normal already is the hub for McLean County and an area beyond McLean County for shopping and retail and entertainment, and this enhances that. And so I think it'll generate more traffic from that won't be just displacing local dollars. So I think that's a positive. Going back to the original College Hills Mall, not the shops at College Hills, but the original College Hills Mall, might have been the first such development in Normal where the sales tax rebates were used to get some commercial real estate developed within the community. Normal, one reason on the east side, one reason the boundary line between Bloomington and Normal jig-jags all over the place is that Normal didn't have the wherewithal to support development because we had a state university sitting in the middle of the community that didn't generate property tax, and we were a residential community built up around that and as North Bloomington. So the intentionality of developing commercial property started in the 70s, and College Hills Mall was one of the first to do that, and the agreement there actually paid itself off faster than what was anticipated. And this one could but we're a little more sophisticated, I think, now with projections and whatever. So I think, we know really probably what the performance will be. And as Mr. McBride said, it's probably behooves us to keep an eye on that and pay our obligation sooner if we approve this. But this is not a new thing, is what I'm getting at. Is we've been doing sales tax rebates to incentivize development in the community, for 40 years. This isn't brand new. It's almost like a little TIF district. Really, it functions in the same way. Uptown Normal and other areas. We got one in North Normal. We have one at on the northeast side as well. TIF districts where the redevelopment or the new development generates an increase in real estate taxes. That increase, that increment, we're able to funnel that back into the project. And that's basically what this is. There's going to be an increment here that's generated by the business, and we're funneling that money back into the business. It works the same way. It's just called something different, really, when it comes right down to it. But I understand because this is identified as for Portillo's. It sounds just a little bit too transactional for most people, and it does. It does sound that way. I admit that, but it's not an unusual tool for a community to use, and it comes down to the subjective judgment that Mr. Peterson mentioned earlier. Do we, as elected representatives here, feel that it's a wise investment, that it's a wise risk to take? And we've talked about this recently, even when we did discuss property tax and the fact that Normal and Bloomington still attract attention and people still want to invest here. There are communities where people aren't interested in investing. Does that mean they're just going to come in and try to finance the whole thing themselves? Probably not in this environment. And like I said, this environment has existed for decades now. So I think, to me, it does, the money, the dollars they're talking about, that's important. I think the traffic is important. One of the businesses that's leaving Normal and headed to Bloomington is the Kroger on East College. And that means this area is going to be undergoing redevelopment in the near future beyond just this site. And the traffic that this site will generate is going to be helpful to those who are going to consider redeveloping those other properties. So, yes, Normal's portion of Veterans Parkway frontage is pretty limited. But right there, a block off with a service road there, the Landmark Drive, it's kind of like a service road to all those properties sitting right back there. There's some potential there that maybe is unrealized and where we might have a little boom if the right things happen. And this is really kind of one of the first things that might help us head in that direction as we see eventually within the next couple of years, the Kroger leave and developers looking at that property and think, what do we do here? What do we do now? Well, this gives us a first step, a first major step towards that happening. So, I'm in favor of this. You'd like to see some other growth in the community, employment-wise and population-wise, to help support these things. And we're, some of those things are in the oven right now. Maybe we hear some things. So hopefully, this is one of those things that just works in with everything else that's happening.
Ms. Gaines?
Excuse me, I was just going to restate something, I guess. So in terms of, it's already been said, but we will, that $400,000 that's very likely to happen once, that we're going to get once the $1.8 million is repaid. If we didn't spend that $1.8 million, we would not be getting any of that money anyway.
Correct.
So it would be no money. And that now or 4 or 5 years down the road. So this isn't like that we're going to lose money. It's an investment to make money. So it's kind of like if I decide to put some money into an investment, I call my broker and I say, hey, I want to put X number of dollars in here, and I'm hoping that it'll grow. This is a way much better return on the money we could ever get if we put some of this money in the bank. Let's just say it that way. And if we just did nothing, we get nothing.
You know, over the years, I've learned that you have to take the long-term view on projects like this. You can't look at what happens next year or the year after. You have to look in terms of the life of the project and what it does for the community as a whole. And the life of this project, 20, 30, 40 years, none of those are unrealistic numbers for what that project can generate for the community. So, you know, there's some gut questions I always ask myself when we go forward with these things. Is it good for the community? Does the community want it? And can we afford it? Well, I think we've demonstrated the affordability of it in that sense, and there's no question that this community wants a Portillo's. You know, it's a hot dog, I know, but it's the hot dog everybody it's the hot dog everybody wants. People have been bugging me to death about when's it coming and where's it going, which leads into a question: did we know where it was going to go 6 months ago? No, we didn't. Did we know that it was a real deal 6 months ago? No, we didn't, because we didn't have an agreement. And for a big chunk of that time, we didn't have land for them to be on. So it looks like this just pops up to the community. It's not. It's a long process to go through these kind of agreements. And when you're dealing with private businesses like this, they demand confidentiality. They feel it's they lose competitive advantage if they're out in front announcing their projects before they're ready to go on those. And I'm not going to go over all the things that have said. I think everybody's on the same page, but I'm going to echo something from my personal experience that you said, Mr. Fritzen, is will some businesses lose business? Yes, they will. And for my 40 years in retail, that's probably happened to me 4 or 5 times. But I will tell you, if you're a good retailer, if you're conscientious, and you're competitive in the marketplace, that business always comes back, and it always did come back to us. Might have taken a year, might have taken 2 years, but the business will come back to you. So with that, further? Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. That concludes our general orders. We have one item of new business tonight, and that is a motion to approve the fiscal year 2016-2017 to fiscal year 2021 to 22 Community Investment Plan. We've got a
Andrew Hune is going to come up and walk us through the CIP, we call it, and this is part of our budget process. This is the first really formal presentation of an element of the budget that you will consider in a work session on January 26th. Staff has been working on this document now for a number of months, and the actual proposed budget is fairly well done at this point. It will be sent to the printer here shortly and will be distributed to all of you sometime after the first of the year. So, but we have, it's been now, I think, several years that we have started with the community investment plan, and we found it was beneficial to talk about these major construction projects, and we're talking roads and utilities and buildings, and these are major capital projects. We found it useful to talk about these projects outside of the discussion of the operating the operating budgets of each department, because the capital projects kind of get lost in the shuffle, and they are very important. Obviously, lots of dollars committed over the 5-year spending plan here. So Andrew's going to hit some of the highlights, I think, and then we will be prepared to respond to questions. Andrew and his team coordinate this project, but many of the people, staff people in this room have been feeding into this report over the last 3 months. So it really is a product of the team effort. So, but Andrew will walk you through the
Before
details.
you begin, we need a motion.
You do.
So moved.
Mr. Kuhn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mr. Peterson, as Mark mentioned, it's the first major report we bring to Council as part of our budget process. We bring it every December for your review. I know many of you have already gone through this in great detail from July, from our budget kickoff to now. You are going to accept and approve this report, assumingly tonight, but that doesn't mean you can't make changes to it going forward. This is our first draft at what we feel is the Community Investment Plan, or the CIP, and it represents the town's essentially that 6-year commitment to community investment, a variety of projects and so forth. For this current year and the next 5 years, there's 177 projects in this report, almost about $100 million of spending in the current year and the next 5 years. The report details items in terms of a summary level of category, of funding source, and also of actual description of raw detail from the project. It also gives what's been funded for the next 6 years and what has not been funded for the next 6 years. It gives the unfunded projects are about $125 million of spending that could be done. Those items are pulled into the budget when appropriate, when funding is available, and when there's a value to add that project in. So essentially, 1 year falls off, 1 year comes on. In terms of last year to this year, we had $91.8 million of planned spending in the budget for the next 6 years. What we're proposing this year is about $98.8 million, so about a $600 million increase from last year's CIP. In large part, that increase, although it's challenging to kind of nail down some of that stuff, in large part it results from the council's additional commitment to concrete street repair and improvement. We're spending about $1 million a year for the next 6 years on that, roughly about $1 million. We like to keep that available in terms of interaction with the public and make it available to them. So what I want to do for the next few minutes briefly is just take you through some of the report itself, what it's telling us in terms of numbers, and some of the raw project data. So if you wish, you just go to your internet, open your browser of choice, type back up, there we go.
I'm glad we don't pay you by the hour.
Go down and click down below.
I'm an accountant by trade, so come to the town website. And then, of course, you can select from government down to departments and finance. Come to the Department of Finance and the Community Investment Plan. And you can see view the 2017-2022 CIP. You pull this up and you immediately get kind of a flash of color and numbers and narrative. This report essentially breaks it down into a variety of different levels. For CIP category, you can see we categorize things in multiple different ways, mostly for sorted analysis. Public facilities, transportation development, parks and open space, utility services, and capital assets. You can see the color here represents the staff's recommendation to council about priority. Blue being critical, meaning it really needs to be done as planned with no deviation or very low deviation from the plan. Important yellow means it's extremely important but can suffer a little bit of deviation in terms of pushing a year or two out. And then, of course, flexible means is even greater deviation, can be pushed a couple years here and there. The gray simply means that it's either completed or ongoing. Again, we talked about this report showing the current fiscal year and the 5 fiscal out years in the budget plan. You can see we have 2016, 17, 17, 18, and so forth. If you scroll down, you can see that at the bottom, we're spending about $5.2 million out of our capital fund. That's just one of the many funding sources we have for capital. This report takes us through several different funding sources. You can see that if you want to select an actual project, just to pick one randomly here, let's pick Ironwood Golf Pass for $300,000. If you click on that, you can see it changes to a little hand with the index finger. Click on that, it pulls you up to just basically a sheet that gives you the contact name, just a brief description of the project. Some are a lot more lengthy descriptions, and I'll show those in a few moments. And then, of course, talks about the fact that we'll be replacing a lot of the needed replacement of the cart paths out in Ironwood. You can scroll down and see that it wasn't actually in last year's approved budget, but we have managed to put it in this year's capital project budget, which is part of the increase in the overall spending plan for that 6 years. Going back just like one more that might have some pictures to show you, Underwood Park Shelter for $100,000. That's actually budgeted for 18-19, an out year beyond the budget, but it's still planned to be spent. Click on that and you can see that this is replacement of the main picnic shelter in Underwood, built back in the 70s, so things need to be replaced over time, particularly when they're 30 plus years old, 40 plus years old. You can see that, again, the contact information. You can pull the picture you want to look at. That gives you, that's the actual one right now that would be replaced over the time of that budget. Close that and go back. And then finally, just one more to look at kind of a multi-year project. If you can scroll down here a bit, we'll come down to the CAC, the Community Activity Center facility upgrades. You can see we're going to be spending money in the current year, next year, and the out year. Again, you pull that up, and this has quite a bit of detail in terms of narrative, which is very helpful for anyone interested in that project. If you scroll down, you can see Mark Clinch is the contact for that, as well as some folks in folks in Parks and Rec. Scroll down, you can actually see some more detail in terms of what's going to be done for those funds. And then again, that was not budgeted in last year's CIP, but was able to be funded this year in the current fiscal year, and then of course the 2 out years beyond that. Again, I mentioned that we have several funding sources that we use. This is more of an accounting issue and a budget and finance issue for governments, not necessarily that important to the casual user of what's being spent in terms of community investment. But you hit this right box, there's a dialog box or a menu pull down. You can see we have motor fuel tax. Click on that and it pulls up all the projects that are being funded by motor fuel tax, which is our motor fuel tax that we collect from the state. And that's obviously restricted to transportation projects. These, of course, are going to be resurfacing projects, road improvement, any kind of bridge work, traffic signals, and so forth. And you can see here they're all listed in the same kind of format as the capital plan was. Again, a 5-year look. You can see 3.2 million, 3.3 million, and so forth in the next couple of years. To look at one in terms of just randomly, we'll pull up Hershey Road Improvement. And you can see this gives a little more detail of the 2-lane concrete street with curb and gutter from Shepherd Road to Rab Road. Click on the map, and it gives the user a sense of where that's actually going to be. So here is Hershey Road between Shepherd and Rab. So someone looking at this would know immediately where the project is. They would know immediately how much it's going to cost, and they would know essentially when it's going to be happening. Probably a little engineering work this year, and then obviously the full work in fiscal year 17-18. Uh-oh, red alert. Yeah, lost the, click too far back. There we go. We also look at utility services. Again, water and sewer have their own capital plans that the council observes and passes, and they pay for from their own capital funds. I'll just look at water real quickly again to show you again the same kind of feel, prioritization of the work. You can, if I scroll down a bit, you can see how much is being spent. Significant dollars, as you're aware, for the capital maintenance and the commitment from water and sewer to the community in terms of ensuring continued quality water. 4.7 million, 5.3, 3.6. You know, major projects, and you can get a feel for the significant expense associated with maintaining a water system. Just pick one randomly here, water main replacement for Tamarack Trail from Ironwood Drive to Haver Hill. Pull up that, and you can see this is actually pretty unique. It gives, again, a fairly good narrative, 6-inch water main in that location. Pull up the map, and you can get a good sense of the neighborhood that it's involved in, and of course, the eventual disruption that will be occurring in terms of that fiscal year 17-18 project. You can see it was budgeted in the previous year's CIP. It stayed in the CIP this year, which is very typical. Once we kind of plan for it, we can typically do it without a problem unless there's some kind of significant change in the finances. In this case, there are not, of course. Water remains to be a strong fund, and actually the estimates dropped down a bit, which is always good to see. We did add a couple, oh darn it, I did that again, excuse me. I must be, there we go. Again, I'm an accountant by trade, so I don't pretend to get extra training on how to get to the CIP project information. In the past, for many years, we utilized this report to be kind of the pay-as-you-go information. However, we were kind of ignoring a significant capital spending that we were doing as an organization, as a town, in two areas. One was the bond finance projects. Those never kind of found their way into here. Frankly, there wasn't a good reason why that wouldn't occur. And also, as you're aware, we spend quite a bit of money on vehicle and relatively large pieces of equipment that's in our vehicle reserve. Those also were not in here. We felt at a staff level it was time to kind of represent that to the community because it certainly is significant capital spending. It's not necessarily a capital project per se, but it certainly is capital investment to provide services to the community. So if you pull these down, you'll see a bunch of extra ones here. I'll just look at one real quickly. General vehicle equipment and reserve. This has all been translated from the budget, and we kind of summarize a lot of this information, but you can see for the vehicle reserve, this is also pay-as-you-go financing, basically. We're spending about anywhere from $4.5 to $2 million a year over the next 6 years. To give you, and these are kind of highly summarized categories, but to give you a sense of just the infrastructure that we need or the actual capital assets, we went back and we looked at this very closely. Over the next 6 years, we're going to buy about 45 police cars. We're going to purchase new radio systems. We're going to buy 4 ambulances, 2 fire trucks, 5 plow trucks, 6 garbage trucks, 70 golf carts. It's like a Christmas list, hasn't it, a little bit? And virtually a lot of equipment in terms of backhoes and hydro excavator and certainly a lot of different front loaders and so forth. So these are all things that we plan for in terms of our capital need to provide the operating services of the town, from police to fire to public works to parks and recs to garbage collection and streets and inspection and so forth. And all these things have a significant capital cost that we started wanting to include in this capital investment plan. And also, of course, water and sewer have their own capital investment plans, their own vehicle reserve plans. Similar, they're a little smaller than the general fund, of course, but they're having equipment and needs and also vehicle needs. And then finally, we included our debt financing funds. This is mostly related to the new fire station that's under construction now. That's debt financed. Again, it's not pay as you go in terms of how we traditionally think about it, but it is debt financing. It is a commitment of resources from the town. So we wanted to include that in here. So now we feel with this year, it's always been a pretty good picture of our capital investment from a pay as you go standard. But we felt as staff we were missing a lot of significant capital spending that need to be talked about and reported for the community to understand. So we've added again the vehicle reserve spending and also the debt reserve, the debt financing projects that we have. They won't always be on there. We go every once in a while years without a capital debt finance project, but in this case we do have certainly the new fire station. We have commitments to redevelopment for the new Phase 2 building in Uptown Circle, and of course future development in terms of land acquisition and so forth for more development on the south side of the track. So that's all kind of accounted for in here. It gets a little unusual in terms of the reporting, but it gives you a sense of where total spending is going to be at. So with all of that, again, just to reiterate, just under $100 million of planned spending for the current year and the next 6 years. The next step, of course, will be to essentially take this data once assume we approve, and we will work it into the final budget document for you to see proposed in January, although I know you're quite involved in that process as it is right now. So. With that, we can certainly look at other projects. The department heads are here who can provide you more detail on those. I'll certainly try to address any questions you have. But again, we want to make this report interactive for the public. It represents our first significant report to the council in terms of major capital investment and major budgeting for our calendar, for our fiscal year.
Could I just add, I do want to point out, and maybe you mentioned it, just point out again, in each of these categories, we also list projects not funded. These are projects that we've identified as needs or future needs, and we just don't want to lose sight of those, but for a variety of reasons, funding has not been identified. In many cases, simply funding not available. You notice indoor community recreation center, $30 million. We don't have funding for that. Soccer complex, $15 million. We've talked a lot about that, but it is not funded. Some of these are considered, nothing here that's what I would consider urgent need, but certainly some that have been identified as needs, flexible needs, that we can't fund. Now, again, every community has these. We're not alone, and I'm very pleased with the number of projects that we are able to undertake, but we always keep track of these other things that we'd like to have that are needed, but, we can't necessarily address all our needs. But these are projects we certainly want to keep track of so we know they're there, and the reason I point this out is if there's anything on those lists that you would like us to consider moving into a funded category, we're happy to do that. Now, we'll have to do some trading to make the numbers work, but you may see something in your mind's a higher priority than what staff assigned to it, and that's certainly you have that opportunity either now or as we move towards the budget, because all of this will be incorporated into the budget document. You'll still have the opportunity during our budget conversations to make those suggestions.
Fair enough. Questions or specific things you want information on? So hearing no comment, please call the roll.
I do want to make one comment there.
Oh, Kevin had a question.
I just had one question. I think as going through this, I frequently get questions about road and infrastructure investment, and although this is very well done, as always, I always compliment you every year on this and how well it's laid out, and the opportunity for us to see this in advance of January is very helpful, I think, for us. It can be difficult to string all together the numbers of where all the road pieces, because they are in the different funds. I'm wondering if we can create a roll-up page that gives us that, or at least a graphic that gives us all of that.
Absolutely, and that's a great idea, because it is obviously a commentary people want to know about, and certainly one we care about significantly. The nature of the funding sources kind of make that summarization challenging. To pull off yourself, we can certainly provide a report that just simply shows here's what we're spending on roads and resurfacing, and make that in this report.
Infrastructure, yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's all coded, so it's really almost a push of the button to do it, to sort by all those other things, and we can provide, again, we've chosen to organize it by fund, but we could certainly also provide a tandem report that summarizes by the activity, whether it's utility or transportation. It's easily done.
We did, I will share with you, we're trying to make it a little easier in terms of our budget and accounting. We used to have a fair amount of things strung through general fund. We did create kind of a new capital fund that's called the roadway fund that helps at least support in part some of the roadway expenses we have. In addition to the motor fuel tax spends a great deal of money on resurfacing and road construction. So, but they can certainly be much more consolidated, to easier to see, and that can be done without a problem.
Thank you. Appreciate
Ms.
it.
Gaines?
I guess I just wanted to point out, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think the gentleman that spoke earlier kind of had a question about the motor fuel tax and where that goes. That's what I thought I heard anyway. And so I kind of wanted to clarify that motor fuel tax is used for roads and streets and bridges. It's not used for anything else.
Yeah.
And so, like, for when we're talking about where that went tonight, that was going towards paying for all of the infrastructure of the streets and all that happened in uptown when we had to redo all the roads, when we were also redoing all of the water and sewer that had to be done down there. So I just wanted to clarify, because I want people to understand that that's where it goes. And water pays for water, sewer pays for sewer, motor fuel tax pays for roads. And then we come back to other things for the general fund.
Yeah, you're right, Ms. Gaines. We are it's very closely and strictly regulated by the Illinois Department of Transportation how we use MFT funding, and it has to have a transportation component. The action on the omnibus vote agenda was really a preparation for an ordinance you will consider. We'll ask you to consider at your next meeting. It involves refinancing a 2007 bond issue, and we are using some MFT funds, as you said, to cover the debt service for the road, street improvement elements of that, and we had to get this MFT resolution adopted in advance. At your next meeting, there will be an ordinance asking you to authorize the refinancing of that 2007 issue, which is a good thing because it's going to save us a lot of money. We'll be able to take advantage of lower interest rates today as opposed to what existed when those bonds were issued back in 2007. I wish the interest rates were as low as they were about 40 days ago because they've gone up a little bit. But they still are very good, and we will still realize a considerable savings by refinancing that bond issue, which will probably happen sometime during the first quarter of 2017, but we want to at least get the ordinance approved so we can move as soon as market forces, the rates and what are most favorable. Thank you.
We didn't. Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The CIP is adopted. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there comments or concerns? Hearing none. Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
I'm leaving you a map. Do I put it inside here?
Do you take this one? Yes, I can.
And then
Oh,
what's
yeah,
the
I've got
trick
that in
to
my
the new
coat.
one? Because I was like stuck out there.
Okay, you have to take it on this side, and there's two things. One has a red